It starts quietly. No one notices at first. You're a child, maybe 5, maybe 8, sitting at the edge of a room that feels too loud and too heavy all at once. There's laughter, but it isn't safe. There's silence, but it isn't peace. So you learn to disappear, not by leaving, but by shrinking. Your voice softens, your footsteps fade. You smile when you're scared. You say I'm fine when you're not. And long before you ever had the words for it, you learned the most dangerous survival skill of all. You learned how to hide, even from yourself. Psychologists call it emotional concealment. But that phrase doesn't quite capture what it feels like, does it? Because this isn't just about being quiet or private. It's about learning, deep in your bones, that visibility equals danger. A child who learns to hide isn't born invisible, they become invisible. Somewhere along the way, love started to depend on silence. Approval depended on obedience, and safety depended on disappearing. Maybe you had a parent who was unpredictably faction one moment, anger the next. Maybe your tears made things worse. Or maybe no one even noticed when you stopped crying. So you adapted. You became small enough not to disturb anyone, polite enough not to upset the peace, strong enough not to need help. And from that moment on, hiding wasn't just something you did. It became who you were. This video isn't about blame, it's about understanding. Because behind every quiet adult who says I'm fine, there's often a child who once believed that being seen meant being hurt. Let's talk about what happens inside that child. How they learned to hide, how it shaped the way they love, and how they can finally learn to come out from behind the mask. Imagine a little girl named Leela. She's sitting at the dinner table, hands folded, fork untouched. Her father's voice is sharp, her mother's silence even sharper. Every word feels like walking on glass. So she learns, don't make noise, don't make waves, don't make them angry. Or picture a little boy named Sam. He runs to show his mom a drawing he made at school. But she's crying again. She says she's just tired, but he feels the heaviness in her voice. He folds the drawing behind his back. He doesn't want to be another problem. That's how it begins. Not in one big moment, but in 1,000 small ones. Moments that whisper, your feelings are too much, your needs are inconvenient, your joy takes up too much space. And so, piece by piece, the child builds armor. They start reading the room before they enter it. They laugh when they want to cry. They apologize just for existing. They become what psychologists call hypervigilant, always scanning for danger, always anticipating moods, always adapting. Their nervous system learns that safety isn't about being held, it's about being invisible. This is the birthplace of the fawn response, the instinct to please, to blend in, to calm the storm before it starts. It's not weakness, it's survival. Because when love feels conditional, hiding becomes the only way to stay safe. And years later, when that child grows up, they'll wonder why connection feels exhausting, why intimacy feels like exposure, why they can be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. The answer is simple, and it's heartbreaking. They learned early on that to be seen was to risk being hurt, and so they built their life around being unseen. So how do you recognize a child who learned to hide, especially when they've grown into an adult? You might not, because they're masters of disguise. You might notice they're the good ones, the reliable ones, the calm ones. They show up, hold everyone together, and never ask for much in return. But beneath that still surface, there's a quiet storm. You might smile when you're falling apart because you don't want anyone to worry. You might say, I don't mind, so often you forget what you actually want. You might give and give until you're hollow, just to feel like you belong. You became the emotional thermostat of every room you enter, sensing tension, adjusting your tone, regulating everyone's mood but your own. You might keep secrets that no one asked you to keep, or carry guilt that was never yours to bear. When conflict arises, you shrink instead of speak. When someone asks how you feel, you freeze. Because somewhere inside, your nervous system still whispers, careful, if you show too much, they'll leave. You hide behind busyness, or perfection, or caretaking. You wear masks, smiling, competent, unshakable masks, because the thought of being fully seen feels like standing naked in the cold. And even when you long for love, you keep one foot out the door, because vulnerability feels like danger disguised as closeness. Sometimes, you even hide from yourself. You downplay your pain. You say it wasn't that bad. You gaslight your own memories just to protect the people who hurt you. That's what psychologists call gaslighting. the habit of doubting your own emotions because you were taught they were wrong. So you learned to make peace with loneliness, to confuse numbness with strength, to think that needing nothing is power when in truth, it's just armor. But here's the paradox. People who learn to hide are often the most observant, the most compassionate, the most intuitive souls you'll ever meet, because they had to be. Their survival depended on reading what wasn't said. They became mirrors, reflecting others so clearly that they forgot what their own reflection looked like. Neuroscience backs this up. When a child grows up in an environment of unpredictability or emotional neglect, their brain literally wires itself for vigilance. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, stays overactive. The prefrontal cortex, which helps regulate emotion, stays on high alert. It's what researchers call complex trauma, not one big wound, but 1,000 tiny ones that accumulate over time. Studies in the Journal of Personality describe how these children often develop a locus of control that is external. They learn that safety depends on managing others, not trusting themselves. Carl Jung might have called this the birth of the shadow self, the parts of you had to bury in order to be loved. Your anger, your sadness, even your joy. And the tragedy is, hiding becomes so automatic that it feels like personality. You stop realizing it's a defense. Hypervigilance becomes compassion fatigue. Boundaries feel like betrayal. But none of this means you're broken. It means your brain did its best to protect you. It adapted to chaos by creating control. It survived, even when safety was never guaranteed. Understanding this is the first step to healing, because what was learned for survival can be unlearned for peace. But here's what no one tells you. Hiding doesn't stop the pain. It just buries it. You grow up believing that invisibility is safety. But over time, that same invisibility becomes loneliness. You crave to be seen. But the moment someone looks too closely, you retreat. You build connections, but they always feel slightly one-sided, like you're the caretaker, never the cared for. You become addicted to being okay. Because okay keeps you safe. Okay keeps people close. Okay keeps the world calm. But inside, the child you buried is still waiting. Waiting to be seen, not for their strength, but for their softness. Waiting for someone to say, you don't have to hide anymore. The dark truth is that you can hide so long, you start losing track of who's underneath the mask. You forget what makes you happy when no one's watching. You forget what your real laugh sounds like. You forget that love doesn't require disappearing. And the world keeps rewarding your disguise, your reliability, your kindness, your composure. So no one ever thinks to ask, are you tired of pretending? But here's the thing about suppressed emotions. They don't die. They wait. They leak through exhaustion, burnout, anxiety, chronic guilt. They surface in relationships where you feel unseen, in jobs where you overperform and underfeel, in moments of silence that feel too loud, because that's when the buried child starts whispering again. You might think you're hiding from the world, but really, you've been hiding from the parts of yourself that were never allowed to exist. And those parts are still there, waiting for your permission to come home. So how do you stop hiding when hiding has always meant safety? The truth is, you don't rip the mask off. You peel it, layer by layer, with gentleness. Start by noticing when you shrink. Ask yourself, who am I protecting right now? Is it the child who feared rejection, the one who believed silence was love? Begin to create inner safety, not by forcing vulnerability, but by slowly proving to yourself that it's okay to exist as you are. Therapists call this reparenting, learning to give yourself the care, validation, and boundaries you never received. It's not about blaming your past, it's about reclaiming your future. You can practice shadow work, as Jung described, inviting the hidden parts of you into the light with compassion, not shame. When sadness arises, don't hide it. When anger surfaces, listen to it. They're not your enemies, they're your messengers. And most importantly, start letting safe people see you. Not the polished you, not the strong you, the real you. You'll tremble the first time you do. Your voice will shake. Your heart will race. But that's what healing feels like. Truth replacing fear. You're not broken for hiding. You were brilliant for surviving. And now, it is time to use that same brilliance to build a life where you no longer need to disappear. You learned to hide because the world once felt too sharp for your softness. But that softness, it's your magic. It's the part of you that still believes in love, in safety, in being known. You don't have to earn visibility anymore. You don't have to apologize for taking up space. The child inside you is still waiting for one thing, not perfection, not answers, just permission. Permission to exist, to speak, to take up space, to be seen and still be safe. You never had a childhood where it was safe to be real, but you still have a future where it can be. And this time, you get to step into the light, not as the child who hid, but as the adult who finally came home.